I'm just like feeling about it. It's like to make that change, you really have to have desire to do it. It's like the number one thing. Like, do I want this? Because if you don't want it, you're never going to go for it. So somehow there's got to be a shift between this, I just don't care, I'm the one, I'm already okay, versus, is there something wrong and I need to like have this absolute burning desire to know, otherwise it will never come, because I'm just not going to listen to anything or anyone, it feels like.
Yeah, and that's the thing I want to talk about next, actually.
Cool.
Yeah,
Perfect.
The reason why I want to talk about it is, how strong does a desire have to be, and for what does the desire have to be for you to make a change with regard to your sincerity? So let's first look at, for what are you going to change your sincerity? Any ideas? Let's start with Helena.
If you really believe it's going to improve your life.
Well, the trouble for many of you with regard to improvement of your life is that you believe meeting addictions improves your life. So, you know, that's a sort of a touch and go one, isn't it? As to what's going to happen with regard to whether it's going to improve your life. And what did I say at the beginning of the discussion last week? I said this isn't an improve your life. This isn't an improve your life discussion. This is not a self-help group. What is it? What are we doing? Die up the back there? What's the purpose of being here, supposedly?
For a greater good, like for a bigger picture.
True, but even more important than that. Yeah. It's coming down to, please.
To have a relationship with God.
Correct. Yep. Now, can you see, going back to Sandy's comment about desire, can you see my desire for a relationship with God is going to have to be pretty strong, isn't it? For me to be at the stage where I'm willing to look at myself about everything. Can you see that? And also, don't forget that I might look at myself about everything and find my partner, like me, Mary, might disagree as well. So God might be saying, this is the direction you need to go. And Mary might be saying, no, I don't want you to go there. What do I do then? Can you see, if I focused also on improving my life, I'm going, I don't want to upset my relationship with Mary. So what am I going to do? If my desire for my relationship with God is not stronger, because I don't see the advantages of my relationship with God over my relationship with Mary, can you see I'll sacrifice my relationship with God and therefore also sacrifice truth for the sake of Mary? Now, of course that wouldn't be good for both Mary and I to do that, would it? But I might not think that way. I might think, no, I want my relationship with Mary. That's more important to me than any other relationship. And so can you see, not only am I going to have a desire for God, but I'm going to have a desire for God above any other relationship. Now that's pretty tricky, isn't it? Particularly when I'm beginning and I don't see the advantages of having a relationship with God. But I do see the advantages of having a relationship with Mary. And so you can see that if my feelings are, I don't have much faith in my relationship with God, and I have more faith in my relationship with Mary, then I am going to choose, under certain circumstances, to sacrifice my development in my relationship with God for my relationship with Mary. Not understanding that actually if I do that, I'm also sacrificing my relationship with Mary. Ironically. You see, because God requires total sincerity from me. If I'm sacrificing that for the sake of my relationship with Mary, I am sacrificing total sincerity so that I can have a relationship with Mary. So I'm not going to have a sincere relationship with Mary either, am I? If you think about it. But that's not the way I'm thinking. The way I'm thinking is, I don't want to sacrifice my relationship with Mary. If I progress the way God wants me to, The net result being that Mary starts getting upset and angry with me for doing that. Now what of my quandary I'm in, aren't I? My desire for my relationship with God is going to possibly wane under those circumstances, and therefore I'm going to be less desirous of sincerity. And that's going to be a big issue for me. Lolene?
I've had to sort of go right back to questioning whether I really believed in God.
Correct.
And
You're going to have to.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And I keep thinking, oh yeah, I do believe in God, I want this, I want that. And things weren't changing and still not changing, so there's something wrong. And
just hold the mic a bit further away from you.
And in this question, because I have many reasons why I started to look at things like, why am I argumentative and all of this with you?
Yep.
And you are representing God and all this.
Oh no, I'm not.
Well, you are his messenger, and I was just looking at why I would do that, so that I could discredit you, so that I could discredit God, so that I didn't have to do any changes. And so I went to, what if God is, and what if he is this and he is that, and going to that question and constantly asking, what if God is out there? I started to see all these different aspects of God that I never saw before. I just heard them and never really looked at them, and it was just like, it started to blow my mind out with all the things that, like, here I am doing my little tiny little weeny thing and thinking I'm magnificent, and then I look at what God's done, and it's like the infiniteness of it all and the magnitude of it all was just like, how can I possibly think that I have got something more than what he has to offer me? And this was what you kept saying about the little tiny ant in this whole universe, and here I was, this ant, just poking at myself and going, yes, I know. And then in doing that, I started to see this broad sense of what God really wants for us. I mean, he's created this whole universe for our pleasure, and all I'm doing is picking out these tiny little things and complaining about this and that and blaming this and blaming that. And it started to give me a sense of why I had no desire. I had no desire because I was so busy poking my finger, as you say, nitpicking, you know.
Yeah.
And it was like I could broaden my attitude towards all the comments that were being coming back to me, my feedback, as not the little tiny thinking bit, but why is this all happening? Why am I so wanting to keep onto this small-minded, imprisoned state that I keep putting myself? And it came more like, oh, God really wants to really give us the happiness that I keep refusing to have. And in that, I could start to go, well, maybe I can do something, you know. Maybe I can get a desire, you know.
Yeah.
So I
just pause for a moment, because otherwise I'm going to have to edit all this out. Sorry about that. Still ringing, yeah.
Cool.
And if you could just keep your mic further away from you, because your P's are coming out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to edit them out, please.
Yeah.
So further away. That's it.
Yeah,
so, do you have a question?
I wanted to know whether this was just like, I wasn't sure, because after I had these feelings, I was feeling fantastic, and then I walked away and I fell flat on my face. And I thought, am I in cahoots with spirits again, or what was I doing that you know, that...
Well, firstly, it's a personal question, but if you look at what happened, your original assessment is correct in the sense that one of the primary things we've got to do is really question whether we believe in God in the first place, and whether we really do see all that God has done and the benefits of that. And we need to do all of that. But what happens when you make a change, and particularly for you, Laureen, when you make a switch in your attitude or your thinking, you have some quite dark spirits around you always trying to get you back under their thumb.
Yes.
And so what's going to happen is you'll have a shift in thinking, and then all of a sudden, for a period of time, you'll feel quite positive about that shift in thinking, and it might be a quite short period that you feel that way. And then all of a sudden, you'll feel like you're getting hammered by some spirits to get back to the old thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's been happening.
Yeah. If you can keep that mic further away from you.
Sorry.
Okay. The important thing for you now to do is to revisit the thinking that led to your desire improving. Does that make sense to you? Rather than, see, the pattern in your life has been that these spirits who are trying to keep control of you with regard to preventing you from even being happy, you know you've attracted them because your mum in particular is quite oppressive and dark, and you know you've got these dark spirits around you. You know their nationality and everything as well, don't you? And so you know that they're pressuring you and trying to cause you to get down on yourself all the time and things like that. Now, you've had this moment of clarity about, it's about my relationship with God, and why wouldn't I want a relationship with God? Bearing in mind that God's got all these things to offer, why wouldn't I want some of those gifts that God's got to offer? So this is very good clarity. Now, though, what's going to happen straight after you have that is there's going to be emotions coming up as to why you're afraid of embracing that, right? And this is what the spirits get into you about, because you're afraid of embracing the true nature of God, because the deep feeling in you is that the true nature of God is much like your mother. Do you understand? That's your deep feeling. So when you start going, now I'm a bit more open to the true nature of God, and I'm starting to feel like I want a relationship with God, now you're going to have also another feeling, which you could say is an error feeling that has been in you for a long time, that if I do this, God's going to get bossy and demanding and push me around and do all the things my mother has done. And those feelings, if you avoid them, can now be influenced by spirits. So what happened in the thing you're describing is you had a positive reflection about God and the true nature about desire for God, and then straight after that you had a fear come up, which you are unwilling to feel. You understand? And this is why you're shaking now even, because you're unwilling to feel these fears. And because you're unwilling to feel them, you can be influenced back into the old state. Make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Yep. And when you get influenced back into the old state, you get all panicky. And this is why now you feel panicky. And this is why even in your comment you're feeling panicky. You understand?
Yes.
The reason why you're feeling panic is because these spirits want to get you back under control. You're afraid of embracing what you've now realised about God. And also, you're afraid that God's going to be like your mum is. And so, unless you go through those fears and you choose to feel them, you'll want to revert back to, no, I don't believe all that again. And do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, any other questions? Eloisa?
I just wanted to clarify a bit of terminology.
Yeah.
When you're talking about sincerity, you're also talking about open-heartedness. Is sincerity?
Well, no, I said that sincerity causes your heart to open.
Right.
So you could say sincerity is a driving factor in your heart being open.
Yes.
So your heart being open is a state of being, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Sincerity is a quality you can develop to obtain a state of being.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So sincerity is you could say, the quality that you need to develop in order to obtain a state of open-heartedness.
And that's what you're aiming for, aren't you? Open-heartedness.
Well, yeah, because
receive and give.
Yeah, with regard to love and truth, in particular with regard to God, remember every interaction God's having with you is going to be based on sincerity. So unless you're sincere, the flow of love from God and the flow of truth from God is not going to be possible, right? So the goal is to actually deal with anything within myself that causes me to be insincere. Because if I can release that and become sincere, now my sincerity will open my heart to God. Now, as Lolly mentioned, and this is getting back to Sandy's question, the desire for a relationship with God has to be so strong, doesn't it, that it's strong enough to overcome my desire for insincerity. Right? If you think about your desires, remember years and years ago, probably, well, I can remember doing it in 2008, so let's say that's like, quite 15 years ago, whatever, 16 years ago. I drew a scale on the board. And on this scale I had fear and desire. You remember that? And then we had faith on that scale. Right? And remember, in order for your fear to be overcome, your desire has to be stronger. Now there's two ways for your desire to get stronger than your fear. One way is to reduce your fear. Right? The way you do that is by feeling it and processing it. Similar to what Laurene's doing by, having these sort of discussions with herself and then going into these fear states, starting to process through some fear. So you need to go to get your fear lower. You need to get your desire higher and your fear lower. So how you get your fear lower is by being humble to feeling it. How do you get your desire higher? How do you improve your desire? So let's say we're trying to do both things because we want to reduce our fears to the point where our desires exceed our fears. Because then we'll take action. Then we'll do something positive, right? So we want to reduce our our fear and increase our desire. So the way we reduce our fear is by feeling it. How do we increase our desire? So, Nikki, you want to start?
Develop our faith.
Well, faith drives desire, but how do we increase our faith? Helena?
Experimenting with stuff.
Yes. Well, when you say experimenting, let's be more
More specific.
definitive and specific about it.
Well, for instance, if you don't have a desire to be humble, then you would experiment with trying to be humble a little bit.
And see whether it improves your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's look at it from a perspective of God now. What would we do there? Yeah.
Do a relationship with God.
Yeah, because that was Sandy's original question. Like, remember what Sandy raised was this issue of if my feelings are such that I don't really want to become sincere yet, what's going to motivate me to become sincere? I've got to have a desire to become sincere, right?
Right.
Well, and I said as a subsequent result of that, I said to her about my relationship with God has to be more important to me than anything else. And so now what I'm asking is, how does my relationship with God become more important to me than anything else?
Is that when you would examine the benefits of having a relationship with God? Is this when you're talking about looking at your life?
Well, that's a very intellectual thing to do, but you could do that, yes. If I'm very bound emotionally and I'm like a constipated emotionally, then some intellectual things would be handy, maybe to break up the constipation a bit. But what would be better? What would be better? Angela?
Experimenting on receiving a response from God.
Yes,
That's
but
pretty easy, pretty basic.
so we've talked. This is again a sort of there's a real. Can you see? There's a real intellectual approach going on, and this is how many of us are, right? We have a tendency to solve problems using our intellect, but very little desire to solve our problem using our emotions. So how would I go about like developing a desire with God to get this desire stronger? What's got to have to happen to my feelings is what I'm asking with regard to God. What my feelings with regard to God are going to have to change. In what way?
You've got to be honest with them, honest about them.
True, but let's say I'm honest and I go, yeah, I don't like God at all. Does that help me much? No. So honesty is a part of it, obviously, but I might not like God at all. See, most of us have grown up to feel quite angry with God, really, probably, because if you think of any of us who've been brought up in a religious faith, we're probably going to go, like, I went to Sunday school Sunday school every week. I was bored out of my brain. Like, why would I want to do that? Like you start going, well, God's just a waste of time. Well, why would I want to do that? So that's being honest, but it's not helping my desire, right? So, yep.
Feel it. Explore and feel it.
Feel what, though?
My desire and my faith.
What if I don't have any desire? What do I feel? How do I develop a desire is what I'm asking. Sandy?
I'm just going from the example that we're here right now listening to truth about God. So for me, that's been like number one thing. Like listening to you all these years has helped me to that truth to enter my heart.
Yeah.
And learn a different truth to what I've been taught before.
But yeah, as you correctly say though, you can listen to truth, but it takes years to get it into your heart, doesn't it? So you've got to feel the truth about God, which is different than thinking the truth about God, isn't it? So what truths about God do you have to feel about?
That God is good.
Okay, that's a primary one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That God's a good guy, not a bad guy. God's not going to, God's whole desire in life isn't to punish Sandra. It's to help Sandra. That God has your best interest at heart. You're going to have to feel that at some point, aren't you? Because otherwise you're going to be going, why would I want a relationship with God? What's the point of that? I'm going to have to feel, not just think, but feel that a relationship with God is going to be beneficial.
And I feel like that in the process, then you have to then, for people that have been raised in religious lies,
yes,
you have to be willing to let go of those lies.
Correct.
Otherwise, God's truth about God will never enter your heart.
Correct. So that's the second part of the process. You can say, right, I've got to feel, and then I've got to also be willing to release lies. I've got to be willing to let go of concepts that I totally believe are true, and get to the stage where I can feel the truth from God instead. Yep. Because unless I do that, I'm going to hold on to all these corrupt beliefs about God, which is going to taint my faith, and therefore my fear of God. Religions talk about fear of God, don't they? They say fear of God is good, is what they say, right? So my fear of God is going to be up here. My desire for God, if my fear of God's up there, my desire for God is going to be here, right? Down, lower. And what actions are we going to take that are sincere? Like, they'll all be driven by fear. So none of them will be sincere. Right? So that's not good for me either. I've got to get to the stage where my fear of God goes down, right? And my desire for God goes up. That's the only way I'm going to get to the stage where I want God in my life. And I've got to get to the stage where that's more important to me than anything else as well. So my desire for God's going to be stronger than my fear of Mary, or my fear of my dad and mum, or my fear of people attacking me and abusing me and belittling me and being condescending to me and all that kind of stuff. My desire for God has to be stronger than that, right? Now, What we're asking is, how does my desire for God get stronger than that? Remember that desire is a feeling, so it's going to have I'm going to have some feeling changes about God, aren't I? Yeah, Eloisa?
As you do those things, like as you experiment with feeling, it's also about faith, like remembering the different feelings that you have and the different experiences and the different possibilities.
True, so part of the process is that I go through some feelings and I remember that I've gone through them. It's no good forgetting them. Right, so that's important too, yes. I need to remember them. But what feelings will they be is the question I'm asking.
Well, as I say, there's going to be ones that you're going to release at the same time as ones you're going to accept.
Okay, so let's look at my fears about God. What will they be?
It could be all kinds.
The other ones I've got to release.
Yeah, you might be punished.
Right, so I'm worried that God's going to just hammer me.
Yep.
Yep. Another common one is God's going to control me.
Yep.
Like I give my heart to God and God's going to go, you do this, you do that. I'm not got my own free will anymore.
Yep.
That's another one, a false belief, but it's one that most people believe.
God might reject you or like decimate you.
Yeah, so whenever I do something wrong, God's going to reject me, right? Because I'm a sinner, I'm going to do something wrong.
Yeah.
So I then think, oh, God's going to reject me whenever I do something wrong, and I don't know if I want a relationship with somebody who I'm trying to have a relationship and then they're rejecting me.
Yeah.
But God doesn't reject us for doing things wrong, actually, does he? But I'd have to know the truth of that. I'd have to.
That's another feeling you could have. You could ask God about how God actually feels about you, the truth of that, rather than all of your false beliefs.
Correct. So I can actually start to ask God to give me God's feelings about things. That would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Very
What are God's feelings about these things? Does God, care about me or want to reject me? What does God want? Like, why have a relationship with God if all I feel is that God doesn't want me? There'd be no point to that, would there? No. So those things will help reduce my fears. Now, of course, many of you have other fears, like, what if I have a relationship with God and nobody likes me? So then you could call it secondary fears, where you're worried about what other people think of you. And that interferes with what God thinks of you. So you're then starting to go inside of yourself, well, what's more important to me? Is God's feelings about me more important than other people's feelings about me? I'd have to work through some of that, wouldn't I? Because if I'm afraid of other people and their opinions, nowadays talking about God's not very cool, is it? It's not very generally accepted. So if I've got a relationship with God and I talk about God and I feel a relationship that's sincere with God, not a fake thing, and people get worried about that, and they're worried about my sanity, and they're projecting all these things at me, what do I do then? It's sort of like, well, if my feelings about the people are more important to me than my feelings that God has about me, then of course I'm probably going to give up my relationship with God. Yeah. Ulf?
What if God doesn't exist?
Yeah, that's a very important question we need to answer, isn't it? Like, what's the point of attempting? Well, I don't know about the attempting, because to me it's logical to attempt to see whether God exists, isn't it? Given the fact there's so much intelligence in the world, it would be logical to believe that such intelligence, had a designer. That would be a logical thing to believe. And so therefore it's logical to at least begin the experiment. Yeah. But what happens 10 years down the track and you still haven't felt anything?
Yeah. Second thing is, as I thought of, is what about if I can't get a relationship with God at all, even if I try whatever I can?
Yeah, but even that shows you some errors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're not going to get it through trying. Because we talked about that already, haven't we? That's not going to happen that way. Because trying, and really a lot of times when we answer our own questions, we're really seeing our own problems. Because what we start to see is go, oh, okay, yeah, I want to try. And I don't want to feel, but I want to try. I'm distancing I want to make it an intellectual thing rather than an emotional thing. So these things can help us. But again, I've got to reduce my fears about God. So we talked, Eloisa raised some of those fears. That's not exhaustive list though, is it? No. Like, what about religious beliefs? They can be fears, can't they? It's like, how many people are really worried about hell, burning in hell, if they've been taught that as a child? That they'll be there forever. You know, that's a fear motivation to believe in God, but obviously not a sincere motivation to believe in God. But it is a fear motivation, so that increases your fear. You're going to have to, if you really believe that, you're going to have to deal with that, right? You've got to get to the stage where the fear is lower than desire, but how do you increase the desire? The increasing in desire to know somebody is all about what? Like, if you want to know me, what do? Nina? You don't come to a seminar, right? No, I'm serious.
You seek to understand.
So how do you do that?
Well, you've already mentioned one, as you look at the world around you and you see intelligence.
No, Corny's next to you. How do you get to understand him?
I ask questions.
What do you mean you ask questions? So let's be more specific.
About his life, how he feels about certain things.
Okay. So you ask him about his feelings about things?
Yeah.
Yep. So what can you do with God? You can ask the same, can't you?
Thing.
What does God feel about this? What does God feel about that? You can do that, can't you? Yeah. And then what if you can't feel the response of what God feels?
Somewhere in you there's a lack of sincerity.
That's what you've been told, but you don't know that.
Okay. Sorry.
So
lack of response.
Yeah, so let's say I'm asking God for what God feels, and I can't feel what God feels. I don't feel like I'm getting an answer.
Well, for me it'd be like, okay, this isn't working, what else can I try?
Why would you give up trying the first thing? Here's what you would do. You'd go, I'm not feeling the answer from God. There's got to be something wrong with my sensitivity to feelings. Because God wants to give me feelings. When I've got a sincere question of God, God wants to give me a sincere response as a feeling, as an answer. He wants to do it. I've got to believe that. But if I do believe that, and I'm not getting an answer, the very first thing I've got to look at is...
I'm not sincere.
No, well, there's that. But what if you are sincere, but you're refusing feelings?
I'm not humble.
Not humble. I'm not humble to feelings. I'm insensitive. Now, you can see for many of us that is a problem, because we've grown up to we've been browbeaten by our society and by our parents, and usually by ourselves, to be insensitive. We've tried to tune out of sensitivity, because what's a person who's sensitive? Weak and insipid, really. These are all beliefs, of course, all wrong, but we believe that sensitivity, stoic is good, sensitivity bad, right? So if I'm not feeling God's feelings, I feel that I'm sincerely asking for God's feelings and I'm not receiving them, then the very first thing I really need to look at is...
what's first, the insincerity or the lack of feeling?
Well, remember, Sue asked this question earlier, and I said they're two separate things.
Yeah.
I said humility can lead to sincerity, right? But they're two separate qualities.
So you need to look at both.
They need to both be developed.
Yeah.
We've talked about that, right? They need to both be developed. You can't independently develop one and hope for the other. They need to both be developed, right? So we want to focus on, okay, I think that I'm sincere, and I feel like I'm sincere, and I often feel that you will feel when you're sincere frequently, like you'll feel that you really want to know and you really want to understand, and you feel quiet. And it's not when you really want something, you don't go, I just had a 5-minute prayer about it 3 days ago and then I forgot about it, do you? No. It's like when you're really sincere about something.
You burn for it.
Yeah, it's like you're every day feeling, thinking. It's not. You could say it sort of plagues you in a way, doesn't it? That's how it sort of feels. you'll know that that feeling is there in you. And then if that feeling is there and you're still not receiving a response, then you'd have to go, well, I must be pretty insensitive to God's responses if I can't feel them.
Yeah, there's something here that I need to feel that's scaring the pants off me, basically.
Possibly,
Yeah.
possibly. Or it could be just that I've become so detuned from my emotions through years and years and years of not having them. You know, I remember when I first started feeling emotions again, I was in my 30s and I started to cry. Now, I hadn't cried since I was about 7 or 6. And it was until I was 33 or something, I never cried. Right? That's a long time to be insensitive. There were things I could cry about. There were plenty of things that went wrong in my life during that period. I had a marriage breakdown. That was one thing I could have cried about. I had my entire business stolen from me, literally, like stolen. I had people steal from my house this all happened in that period. Like I had all sorts of troubles with my wife wanted to run off with another person and leave me during that period as well. I could have cried about all of them, and I didn't cry about any of them. That's how insensitive I was. You understand? And so when I was 33, I remember going to a psychologist once because I was wondering why I was so detuned, right? Because I was stoic, and they said to me, "How would you feel if a certain event happened?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, that's the problem. You should know what you would feel." You know what I mean? And I started seeing, before then I didn't think it was a problem, but he said to me, "That's the problem." And I go, "Yeah, probably is a problem. I need to do something about that." And that helped me address the issue of my own lack of sensitivity. Why I'd shut it all down, why I'd detune from it all. What went on there? What was the point of all that? And in the process, I opened up and I started crying.
And you were on your way.
Yeah, I haven't stopped crying. It's 30-something years later. I still cry. So that's a good sign. No, I haven't shut it off again. Because I could have gone, cry for a bit, oh, this is all too much, shut it off. It could have been easily the case, but chose not to. But you can see that I was so insensitive that I couldn't even feel my own feelings, let alone somebody else's, right? Couldn't even feel my own, right? And so I'm going, well, let's say I'm trying to have a relationship with God and I can't even feel my own feelings. Do you think I'm going to be able to feel God's if I cannot feel my own?
No.
Of course not. So logically, that thing hit me like, oh, I want a relationship with God and yet I can't feel my own feelings. There's got to be something I do about that. Because if I don't do something about that, how am I ever going to feel God's feelings? Yeah.
Inherent within that, though, is the understanding that your relationship with God is an emotional one. Like that it's the exchange of the feelings.
There wasn't even that at that stage, Nina. At that stage, all it was I can't even feel my own feelings.
Yeah.
How can I have a relationship with anyone?
Yeah.
I don't even know what I feel. I can't even guess what I would feel in a certain situation. I can't even put myself in a situation and feel, oh, that's what I would feel. Can't even do that. And it was very, the question was what would happen if some people who came into my house when myself and my sons were there and they started torturing my sons in front of me, what would I do or what would I feel? And I said, I don't really know.
So the key point, though, if I'm hearing you, is you understood that's a problem.
Yes. Well, I was self-reflective enough to understand that was a problem. But of course, before then I wasn't. Yeah. But somebody raising it with me, there's a good thought. Never given that any thought.
So somebody gave you a truth. Somebody
gave me a truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the truth can come almost from anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody gave me a truth and I'm going, well, that's sort of a problem, right? I can see what he's saying. How can I have relationships with people that are any good if I can't feel myself and I don't know my own feelings? And I go, okay, what am I going to do about that? So I went along to this other guy, and and we talked about getting to the stage where you can feel what you feel, see what you see, hear what you hear, know what you know, not be detuned from your own state, And we did some body work. He did some body work as well, and I'd have some like crying responses to the body work. He didn't talk to me much. Just did some body work, and I'd have some responses, and that helped me open up to my feelings. And it wasn't long, a couple of months of that, and it wasn't long, and now I could feel my own feelings by myself. Does that make sense? Now that I could start to feel my own feelings, now when I ask some feelings about God, I could at least have some responses. So it was during that time that I started asking things like, was God a punishing God? And it was during that time that I realised that God, even though my entire religious upbringing in this life had been that God is one, it was during that time that I worked out that God wasn't one, wasn't punishing. But it was only because I had opened up to my feelings first.
It must have been a game changer.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Along with a lot of other things that happened during the same time. Yeah. So it took somebody saying something to me and me being able to go, oh, yeah, that's actually right. And then me wanting to do something about it. Before I took any action. And then, it was great because before then I didn't really sort of see things like I can remember, like I've said to you before, I think, driving down a highway and then all of a sudden realising that I could actually recognise and feel colour. That I hadn't ever been able to do that my whole life. I saw colour, but couldn't feel colour. And it was just a major change over my life, just how I could now feel things that I didn't feel before. And they were all there already. I just never felt them. Because I detuned from it when I was 6 or 7 and shut it all down. So now that I'm capable of feeling, getting back to Sandra's question, I'm wanting to I can now feel when I'm afraid. Right, so one of the things I felt during that time was that before then was that God was going to, I felt by leaving my religious faith, that meant that I would be eternally condemned. And I felt that as a fear, and I had to work through that fear in order to come to the conclusion that God wasn't like that. Does that make sense? I had to work through it as a fear. Once I worked through it as a fear, I came out of that nearly a year later. I came out of that feeling that, no, actually, I'm not condemned. I haven't been condemned by God. I've been condemned by the religious faith, but they're wrong. Because God hasn't condemned me. God just wants me to grow. He wants me to become more loving. He doesn't condemn me. He wants me to improve, but he doesn't condemn me forever. Right? So that was a major shift in my attitude to God. Now there's a major shift in my attitude to God. My desire for a relationship with God can improve.
You're going to want it.
I'm going to want it now, because before I was just afraid of it. Now I want it. So now I'm developing this attitude where I want to have a relationship with God. And what was very helpful during that time is hardly anybody else wanted a relationship with me at all in my whole life. So I didn't have many other relationships to distract me from wanting the relationship with God either. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to do that, but that's just what happened. Now, in that process, my desire for God began growing because I was starting to get to feel and therefore get to know God. I was asking questions of God and over time getting responses that I could feel and therefore respond to. Right? So initially I was asking the question, has God condemned me for the rest of my life? It took me a year to feel that wasn't true. But in that year, I had to release a lot of fear, and I had to release a lot of false beliefs that I had. And in the process of doing that, I could then feel what the truth was about that.
So each time you release a false belief, there's that sense of newness and more positive. There's a shift that somehow life is better because of it, and then
Always, yes, always.
And that is the impetus to also to continue, because you've had an experiment that's been positive.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's proven to be true in its effectiveness. Correct. Yep. So now in the process, my desire for God is growing, and my fear of God is going down. At some point there's going to be a crossover where you go beyond 50-50 and your fear is now less than your desire, right? And when you get to that point, now your desire begins to drive you further. It becomes a passion. And now that's going to be a passion that drives you for good. Like, not just for good in terms of righteous good, but for good in terms of eternally good. It's going to drive you for the rest of your existence. If the fear is greater than your desire for God, then of course that isn't going to happen. Right? And that changing time can only occur through an emotional process, not an intellectual one. Right? So you can think all the good things that you can think, but unless they're feelings, they're not going to have a lot of effect on you. Yep. And I would not have changed without that process occurring. I would never have remembered who I was without that process occurring. It took 7 years after I began that process before I remembered who I was, because I didn't have enough desire to know or understand. And I had huge fears. I had lots and lots of different fears of people and opinions and all sorts of problems that I had. And when I went through the memories of knowing, or when they first come in, they started coming to me in dribs and drabs right from my childhood, but I didn't put two and two together, right? Once I started putting two and two together, it was like full-on emotion for like months and months and months of time, right? That went on for nearly 5 years. But again, because I'd learnt how to be sensitive, I could handle it. I could deal with it, could go through it. Oh.
How can you distinguish an answer from God against your own bias or spirit influence?
Well, firstly, most of the answers that come from God are going to be completely opposite of your own bias. So, in other words, you're going to want to not accept them rather than accept them. So a lot of people sort of believe that when they start asking God things, then God will give them a whole heap of lovely feelings, and God will give them a whole heap of feelings that are sort of like magical, and of course that's what happens with spirits, but it doesn't happen with God. What happens with God is the very first things he wants you to address are all the things that are bad about yourself. And they're all the things you don't want to hear. You understand? And so what happens is you start hearing a whole heap of things that are confronting, that you don't want to hear, that you don't want to accept. And that's a good sign, because that means that you're starting to face up to some truths that you haven't wanted to face up to before. So a lot of people sort of believe they can just fool themselves into God telling them nice things about themselves, or God telling them things about themselves. But if you think about your preferences, they're not to hear bad things about yourself, are they? The majority of people have grown up from their first moments on earth just wanting to feel good things about themselves generally. So what I've found is that God doesn't arbitrate what feelings God gives you about your condition. In other words, he doesn't say, that Jesus character, he's pretty he can't handle things. So what I'm going to do is tell him a whole heap of nice things first. Yeah? Which is what the average person on earth does, right? They go, you think about your average conversation with your partner, you've got an issue to raise. What do you do first? It's not like the average person who's having a compromised relationship just raises a whole heap of nice things first and tries to butter them up a bit and make it all palatable first and everything's good first, and then they drop the bombshell, which is not dropped like a bomb, it's dropped like a little twig. Just even though inside the person emotionally it's like a bomb, but they sort of drop it like a twig. And there's just this little thing, this little tiny thing that needs to be addressed is the average attitude, right? Yeah, God doesn't work that way. God's interested in you making the largest possible changes as soon as you can. Your largest possible changes are going to be the things you find the hardest. So you're probably going to get them first. Yeah. Nikki?
Just reflecting what you're saying in my experience, that's all very true.
Yeah.
But you mentioned last week how you can long and you are sincere with God at the start because you're not aware of all the other stuff going on that you've got to deal with.
Correct.
And God can give you something there.
Yes, because you are sincere and you're not aware.
Because you're sincere when you're not aware.
You're sort of ignorant and you're sincere.
Yes.
In the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in that sense, God can give you a bit of something.
Mm-hmm. And then you start becoming aware.
Yeah, and then that's where it gets really hard.
Well, not really.
The resistance to...
It just requires more humility.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's like the big thing, it's like you can work on some other emotions, but you still don't feel happy inside because of the big thing that you've not dealt with.
Yeah.
It's like dealing with loneliness versus dealing with like another sin, with like the big sin, like with women or women have with men or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you can work on those things, but you still don't feel this feeling like, wow, I've gone over some massive challenge I've had internally.
Yeah, but now you're reducing all of the comments I've just made into a self-help program.
Right.
And what did I say from the beginning?
It's about God.
It's about God, yeah. So one of our biggest problems is we try to reduce everything back to a self-help program rather than continuing to make it about our relationship with God. And so what we have a tendency to do then, Nikki, is we go, I've got to work on this thing because of my relationship with women, I've got to work on that. No, you've got to work on those things because of your relationship with God is damaged because of not having those things or having addictions that interfere with your relationship with God. If my relationship with God is my priority, will I worry about how much I've got to cry? I'm not going to care, am I? No. If I need to cry today, then I cry. If I need to cry for 2 hours today, I have a cry for 2 hours today. That's how it is. If I need to go through some fear for a week, and my bowel doesn't work for a week because of it, and I lose hair in the week and everything else, well, I go through that. That's what I need to do, to go through the feeling. If that's what I have to do, then that's what I need to do. I'm humble to the fact of what's going on. If I get sick because I, have resisted something, then I've got to deal with that too. There's plenty of times in my past where I've gotten sick because I have resisted some feelings. I need to learn the lesson not to resist. And so once I get sick a few times, I go, yeah, that was because I resisted again. So I shouldn't do that, And you learn the lessons as you go, but it's all with the focus of your relationship with God, not just because you want to be, friendly with some women or, want to have a good relationship with your partner or because good relationship with partner and friendship with women and friendship with men and all these other things, they will all come if you're more loving. If you're more loving and you've got that relationship with God and you're slowly working towards God, then all these other things will be added to you. So you don't have to focus on all those other things. You just need to focus your attention on a relationship with God, and the other things will be sorted out in the process. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So don't keep reverting to making it about your self-improvement. It's about how close you can be with God. The closer you are with God, the happier you're going to be. You'll also be more knowledgeable. You'll also understand more truth. You'll also be more enjoyable to be with because you'll be more sincere. There's a lot of side benefits, but all of them are side benefits in comparison to the relationship with God, because that will be the primary benefit. So unless my focus is relationship with God, now all these side things, if I focus on my relationship with God, all these side things need to be addressed. Now, there's going to be side things that come up that look like mountains sometimes, because they'll be big, they'll be big emotional injuries that are preventing you from having a close relationship with God. And you'll go through them because you want the relationship with God. And you know that it's going to improve your life and you know things are going to get better. That's why you'll go through them. But if you decide, I want to go through them because I want to not be lonely, or I want to go through them because I want to have a partner in my life, or whatever, then once you get what you want, then you're probably going to stop. And God's offering you eternal progress, and it would be a shame for you to stop it for whatever reason. He's offering you, bliss in terms of happiness, but increasing internal progress that's infinite in its nature, because God himself is infinite. That's what he's offering you. It'd be a shame to go, I'm content with this relationship. That's like somebody going into the spirit world and then progressing to the second sphere and going, this is a lot better than earth, I'm happy now. And so they stop. And they don't keep looking and progressing and desiring. And they might stay in that state. And I've seen people in the second sphere stay there for thousands of years. There are some people in the second sphere who I lived with in the first century who are still in the second sphere. And what a shame. Because they could be much, much happier. But this is the thing, when we lack desire for God, we get content with certain states. And if you think about it on earth, many of you get to the stage where, this is as good as it gets. And that's it, I'm happy now. And that's a terrible shame to get to that state, actually, because it's not as good as it gets. It can always be better because God is infinite, and the happiness and joy and love that comes from God is infinite as well. And it's only going to require your desire to receive it.
So, could I ask then, when you've received some of God's love, is there always this feeling in you there's more I could get, or there's more happiness that could be there for me?
Yeah. You think about many of the people who've written the Paget messages, and you read what they say, they always say that. We always know and are striving for more because we know there's more available, and we know from experience that the more we receive, the happier we get. And we don't even know sometimes how that's even possible given how happy we already are. Do you know what I mean? And then you receive more, and then all of a sudden you're happier again. It's sort of like, what? How did that happen? But that's what happens. It's like you don't know how infinite God's nature is, and therefore how much is possible, until you start experiencing more and more. Now, obviously, the more and more you experience, the easier it becomes to trust that there's more. Yeah? But right at the beginning, it's quite difficult to trust there's more, isn't it? And that's our problem. When we're right at the beginning, we're going, I don't even know if God exists, let alone, and I don't even know if I believe God exists, let alone can actually feel God or feel that I'm receiving love from God. So, yeah, it takes time particularly during that initial phases, to develop that faith and trust based on experience. The more of God's love you receive, the more faith you're going to have in it. That's a fact, isn't it? It's just like the more you know how to drive a car, the more comfortable you are driving a car. So it's the same kind of principle, really. The more you experience something, the more confident you are in experiencing it in the future. And that's how it is with our relationship with God. The hardest part is getting started. And this is what we're really talking about the last couple of weeks, is getting started is dependent upon sincerity. And after sincerity, being humble to everything that happens as a result of what you feel. Yeah. In other words, becoming more sensitive. So God's trying to open up your soul so you can have a strong desire for truth, a strong desire for love, and a deep amount of sincerity, and a deep amount of being able to feel sensitivity, a deep amount of sensitivity. And the more sensitive you become, and the more sincere you become, and the more love you will feel, and it becomes like a rolling snowball, and like just increasing and increasing, and you gain a lot more confidence in it, and a lot more faith in it as a result. Yeah. So, getting back to Sandra again, because that was the question, wasn't it? The desire issue is a big issue, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because if I can reach a point where I desire God more than I'm afraid of God, and more than I'm afraid of everybody else, right? And I can desire God more, then my progress is assured if I'm sincere. And all of those states are feeling states, they're not thought states. So they're not thinking about it, they're feeling about it. And as Nina raised, if I'm not feeling about it, then the issue is nothing other than my own insensitivity to feelings. Right? Because God is not insensitive to your feelings, and God has her own feelings for you. So if I can't feel that, then it's my insensitivity to feelings that need to be addressed. And you can see that's like a mire as well, isn't it? Like a mud pit as well. Because at the end of the day, there's many, many reasons why I might be so insensitive by the time I've gotten to, say, 50 or 60 or 70 years of age, or even by the time I got to be a teenager even. There's many reasons why I might now be insensitive. I've seen little 3-year-olds get to the state where they're now pretty insensitive, you know? So it can happen pretty quick, where insensitivity grows in us for lots of different reasons. And as an adult, when we're desiring God's love, we're going to need to address it. We're going to need to deal with our insensitivity. You want to get to the stage where your emotions are like a finely tuned race car, you know, like where that any tiny slight adjustment and you can feel it, you know, you can feel the change in you as a result of it. And then you want to get to the stage where they're so sensitive that you can even feel it in everybody else as well. Yeah. That requires a development of your humility. Helen.
What comes to me is that it also reflects the love you have for people when you're so sensitive to the injuries or the difficulties that they're having, but you still give them love and
and you still feel for them, like you're not insensitive to how difficult it is for them either, you know, like you get to the stage where you don't ever belittle yourself or anybody else for what's in them, yeah, but you are firm when you know the truth about something. You don't waver because you can feel what the truth is. And like when I compare that state to like I said, when I was in my early 30s, I feel like back then I was like I don't know, an automaton, really, in a lot of ways. Unable to really feel much of what's going on around me, unable to feel myself, unable to feel God, really. A lot of my things I was doing was totally based upon what I intellectually believed to be true, rather than what I felt to be true emotionally, because I just didn't have many feelings emotionally. Yeah.
And you were just actually demonstrating that love and truth are, joined at the hip, as you say.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens when
Yeah.
you get to that state.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you can see sincerity is an aspect of truth, isn't it? Yeah. So you can see why it's so important, given the fact that the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth, responding to the sincerity in your heart, and the Holy Spirit being the conduit through which love flows to you from God. Then obviously you can see that God is pretty hot on you being truthful and sincere. Yeah. And what I'm getting at in this last week of sort of discussion is that if we want to have a relationship with God, we're going to have to learn that if I'm not receiving love, it is fundamentally because I'm insincere, or if I believe I'm sincere, I'm not humble. Right? So, and either one of those two things are a problem for my future progress. Yeah. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Experiment emotionally. Yeah. And also be honest about your true feelings about God and His existence and how you perceive God to be in your own self, Be honest about it to yourself. It's so important to be reflective about those matters. True prayer is not going to come out of your soul until you're reflective about some of those issues, Many of us sort of believe or think we believe in God, but emotionally it's actually quite difficult to have a belief in God sometimes emotionally for people, There's a lot of things that have interfered with our feelings about God and our ability to feel God's feelings about us in the course of our life. And that's why it's so difficult to get a start. Yeah. All right, well, I think that's enough for today. Are there any announcements you'd like to make, or any?
Yes, thank you everybody for your hard work over the last few weeks and those who've
It's
been
been
volunteering. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, can we use the mic?
Oh yes, of course. Sorry, forgot.
Then people can hear it better.
Yeah, thanks heaps for everyone's contributions to the container painting and towards basically the God's Way office that's going to be set up. We're really appreciative of your efforts over the last few weeks. We're all going to take a rest week this next week, so there'll be nothing on at all next week during the week.
Or the weekend.
Yeah, or the weekend. So it will be probably Tuesday, I don't know what date that is.
The following week.
The following week that we'll get back into things. The 20th. 28th-ish. Just look on the blog anyway. That's just pretty much what I wanted to let you know. Yeah. And be just really grateful.
Is everyone finding it good working towards a goal of,
Yes.
like the goals we're working towards now, like getting the office sorted and then getting down at the centre sorted at some point?
Yeah, the function centre.
Yeah.
It's like actual first steps in function centre. Oh, we've got things to do down there. I'm not sure to give you a progress. There's lots of things anyway. We want to get onto that as well.
Because we've got to get some soil tests done down at the centre, ready for engineering and stuff like that. So
there's no wood to take down and kakiwi to remove so that it can get scraped off with the bulldozer. So there's lots of preliminary things that we want to get done in order that the soil test can get done, and then we can actually start making arrangements for the arena to get built.
Yeah.
So I feel it's a very exciting time at the moment. There's lots of different things happening.
And this coming week, we've already put the environment up for sale.
We have, and the sign will be going up this week. So the sign's finished today. So if we could, I'll talk to you anyway, Connie.
Yeah.
So you might see that on the side of the road, and feel free to tell your friends and anyone else about this lovely opportunity for an environmental enclave in Wilkesdale, because it'd be lovely to sell it to someone who has a similar desire, at least, to keep it wooded, or woodland and bushland. But obviously, if it gets sold to someone else, we won't have any say over that. Yeah. So we're hopeful, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But that will go to creating the function centre. So that's really exciting too.
Yeah.
And meeting God's ways goals.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, Nina, you want to ask?
Oh, it's just...
It's Micah.
It's just a comment how when I first started listening to you, you were up on stage on your own, and for the last while Mary's been with you, and it was different today without Mary there, so pass on our love to her.
Yeah, no, she's just having a rest.
Yeah, it was different. I felt the difference. Yeah.
There's only half of us here. That's right. And Mary wants to do some channeling over the coming weeks, just get back into a bit of practice with it in public. So we still do a lot in private, but haven't been doing a lot in public. So she's over, when she does in the next fortnight or so, we might do a bit of that as a part of these things too. It's hard when you're channeling when there's a lot of this sort of belief in the audience and other things like that happen. And Mary's trying to work through her feelings of being overly sensitive about everybody's projections at her when she's channeling. And so that would be, she wants to get a bit of practice up before we go away, because probably be doing a bit of channeling while we're away. So, yeah. We're also hoping, but I don't know how possible it's going to be, to actually get some recordings while we're away up straight away. But to be honest, these recordings that are coming out of here are quite good, so they wouldn't have to be edited very much, but they do have to be sort of where we go off for a break, and today you could even hear me weeing. Sorry about that. I have to remember to turn off. So those things got to be edited out. And so we don't know how much time we're going to get for that kind of thing, like editing or something like that.
These mics actually seem to be a bit different and more sensitive than the other ones, or is it just that we've got speakers, so we're just noticing things now?
You've got speakers, so you're noticing things now,
Because I'm noticing, like, if it's explosive or you're getting all this breathy stuff, so I just thought we might need a little bit more consciousness about the way we're using the mic.
Well, one of the reasons why we're using the speakers is so you become more conscious. And when we're away, we'll be mostly using speakers, even in small groups, just so people can hear themselves, because it's hard to judge when there's no sound as to what's actually going on. It is actually easier for us to record it without speakers, because there's no double interference and no echo and all this kind of stuff. But actually, it's also good for people to get into good habits. And some of the groups when we're away are about 120 people or so, and so we want to make sure that we sort of start educating people, to use them properly. We are thinking with the mics that I might try to sleeve them a bit and also put a windsock over them, just to try to reduce some of the plosives and some of the handling. Sometimes you hear the bumping.
Yeah, I'll put down some little things next time, because I can am aware that
that's right.
On
So
the wood every time
we're going to need to do that when we're away too. Yeah. So Mary and I are just trying to iron out some issues that we're going to run into, because we're not monitoring the sound when we're away. We're just setting it all going and then just talking. And what I'm noticing too is there's a limit of how many hours it can record before I have to stop and change cards and everything. So we're just having to try and iron out our issues by using you as guinea pigs, iron out our issues with what we're going to be doing overseas. Yeah.
Happy guinea pig.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
But at this stage, I actually listened to last week's sound. It was much clearer than most of the things we've already got.
That's awesome.
So that's really good.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. And it's also a double backup. So the reason why we're using these and we're putting those things on the bottom of those of the mics is because they actually have a little recorder on them. So we're recording a double recording. And the beauty of that is if the power goes out, then obviously we lose all of this. But because these are battery driven, those recordings will continue. And so that means that I won't lose the final mix. With these, it could be going for 4 hours and then the battery drops, or the power drops, and then I won't have a recording for the whole day. Whereas with these, they're recording as we go. So, yeah.
So literally, as I'm talking, it's recording here and over there.
Correct. Yeah, I'm recording in both places. Yeah. Yeah. So we're hoping it's going to work out. That we get a decent recording at least. Yeah.
We'll be grateful if it does, but if it doesn't, we get it.
And Mary and I have just got to get our procedures down right, because it's when you get involved in talking to people, it's easy to forget that the tech is doing something of its own, and there's no one there to monitor it. So it's a bit distracting sometimes because you've got to stop and monitor it. So you'll see me during these discussions stopping it, checking the mobile phone because that's the only way I can monitor some of it at the moment. Which is pretty unusual, right, for me to do. And so I've got to get in the habit of doing it while we're away. G'day. Yeah. Yeah.
In answer to your question of how we've been finding the project work, I've been challenged but also really enjoyed the opportunity to learn new skills that I would never ever otherwise have had an opportunity to actually have, like at my age, who's going to put me on a building site, hello. And
that's right. Yeah.
So I really appreciated that opportunity.
Yeah, we just got these new augers for the excavator.
Can I talk about the augers?
It's so cool.
That's so cool, yeah.
It's so cool. One's bigger, would fit 2 of us in it. It's that huge.
900 millimetres wide.
Yep, 900 millimetres, so ½ metre, and it's they just eat through the soil. It's like a little mole, but obviously large scale. It all comes out. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Just going to make so many things so much easier. So even tree planting we could do, or I was thinking burials we could do. Foundations we could do.
We're worried about that, right?
No, it's just because there's been a conversation, people wanting to naturally be buried. So we're now we've got an auger. So now you might just see a lot of holes around it. So watch your step when you're down there. But they're going to be amazing, aren't they? And we've found some already issues, haven't we? They're about 1 metre high, the actual drill bit that goes down. But we may need to get
very
some.
Heavy as well.
Yeah, Corny and another guy could hardly lift one up. So at Jones we've sort of put it into the ground so that we can get it. But we're all going to have to build some muscles, or we might rope you into pushing things up for a while as we get to use it as well.
And we'll be using them with the build coming up for the water. For the God's Way office, there'll be a 6 water tank. There's a shed being built for which will have 6 water tanks under it, and a couple of park spaces for the office. So, and that's where we'll start using the excavator for the augers first. But it's going to be used on a lot of projects actually. It'll be used on the big build down at the centre when we get started with the arena. It'll be used for that as well. So. Yeah, it's going to be used for a lot of things.
Really useful. Yeah. And there's ones for soil as well as rock, so we can do a lot of different things. We haven't, Connie and I are going to go and actually really test it out in the next little while to see how much they can do. But yeah, we think they're going to be a really good asset to God's Way. So thank you to some of you for your donations, because that's what's actually contributed to be able to purchase these very, very useful tools and equipment that are going to help our builds a lot.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to mean we'll be able to save quite a lot on hire costs with other, with excavators and augers and stuff like that. Yeah.
I probably should say. I should also say thank you. We had so an international donation and also a local donation, or gifts, to the organisation that actually has covered our shortfall that was published on the blog recently. So we're just really, really grateful to those people for their contributions.
Yeah.
It's just it meant that we can continue with some project work as well as have our annual reserve to cover our operating costs as well. So we'll get a few more projects done before we run out of cash again, and we'll keep you updated along the way of how we're going with all those things. So we're just so grateful for the response.
Yeah, that's been good. Very good. Thanks, guys. Have a good week. We hopefully have a bit of a relaxing for some of you who are not working. I know it's been a pretty busy few weeks just past. I know the directors in particular are the most tired, so they need the rest more than anyone else really. Yeah, so it'd be good to get the rest for the week.
It's up to you.
Yeah, so this week Mary and I are going across to visit engineers, so across on the coast for to try to find an engineer to do our arena build. So we're trialling the engineer out with a few other smaller things first, and at this stage we've gone from one engineer, we're trying a second one now, and so we've got some meetings next week. Mary and I will be in to try to find a good engineer who will eventually hopefully be the engineer we use for the bigger projects, you know. And so that, and then Mary and I still have some things to sort out with regard to our trip away, which means we have to go across the coast to pick up some things. So that's why we're going over there. That's what we'll be doing this week. Yeah. But we'll see the rest of you. If not tomorrow or the next day, it'll be a week's time. Yeah. Good day. Well, we'll finish off there, eh?
Yeah, thank you very much.